Well, hello and welcome to Math Blossoms, where growing in mathematics is natural. And today we're going to learn about slope. What is the definition of slope and the different types of slope? We are going to have two additional videos to watch after this on how to calculate slope from graphs, tables, ordered pairs, and equations. So let's get started with our slope. I'm Miss G, the teacher, and the question for today is, what is slope? So the definition of that would be the measure of the steepness and the direction of the line. So this is part of functions. This is part of learning how to deal with linear equations on a coordinate plane, and how steep a line is measured by its slope. And the direction as well. Is it going up? Is it going down? And it can be calculated using two distinct points lying on the line. It's the ratio of the vertical change to the horizontal change. So if you look at the diagrams here, the vertical change on your coordinate plane is the y. So the change in y is what goes on the top of your ratio. We call that the rise. And the change in your horizontal distance, that's the x-axis change. So the change in x would be your run, rise over run. Vertical change over the horizontal change, otherwise known as rise over run. And there's several different diagrams here showing you how that works. So this blue line at the bottom here is rising up 2 and running, I should say, over to the right 3. And so that's why the slope or the rise over the run for this particular line is 2/3. We generally write our slope as a ratio. Sometimes it's a whole number if the ratio is over 1. It can be positive, it can be negative, it can also be 0. Let's look at the different types of slope. There are 4 of them. The way you read a slope is to read it just like you would a book. So if you're reading it from the left side to the right side. It's important that you go in that direction so that you know exactly what slope you're talking about. Because if you go the opposite direction, you might get confused. So definitely read it from the left side of your line towards the right side. And as you can see, this blue one is moving upwards. So as it moves up, that means it's increasing from left to right. That is called a positive slope. When it increases from left to right, moving upwards. Negative slopes are slopes that move downwards from left to right, or decreasing from left to right. And then 0 slopes are what we call horizontal slopes. They're not basically moving up or down. They're just kind of flat. So that's what we mean by 0. And then vertical lines that stick straight up and down like this, those are called undefined slopes, and we will talk about that mathematically in just a moment when we go over these ratios. So for instance, here's an example of a positive slope. We have 6 rising up 6, running over 3, which reduces down to 2. So it's the same as 2 rising up 2 and running over 1. If you were to turn this 2 into a fraction, you would place it over 1, correct? So it would be rise up 2, run over 1. Now this one, this is a negative slope example, and we have it decreasing 8 and running over 2. And that is the same as -4 decreasing and running over 1. And then, of course, a horizontal line. Here's an example of what that could look like mathematically. 0 divided by any number, in this case it's 7, but 0 divided by any number is equal to 0. So as you can see, this line here is right there. Let's see, it's hard to read that. It's kind of blurry. 3, 4, 5. So this would be like a 5 if they're counting by ones. So that would be like a 0 divided by 5 equals 0. And this is why this one here that are vertical lines, the ones that stick straight up and down, these are not actually functions. We're going to talk about that when we talk about identifying functions. The positive, the negative, and the 0 slopes are functions. So they are lines that can be called functions. but the vertical lines are not functions, but they are important that we learn about them. And the reason why it's an undefined slope is because you cannot divide by zero. So sometimes you will have this pop up mathematically. And whenever you have zero in your denominator and you type that in your Desmos calculator, you're going to get this word undefined. That means that you cannot divide by zero. That is a no-no in math. Okay. So we also use the variable m to represent the slope of a line in mathematics. I've often wondered why they chose m to represent slope, because obviously slope starts with an S, so you would think they would use S. And I think it's because we use the letter S for speed, and we don't want students to get confused by speed and slope. So it's good to know that m is the variable that we always use for slope. And so let's keep going here. Let's see. Here's some just examples of slope ratios, which I just talked about. And then we have some mnemonic devices here to help you remember the 4 types of slope. This one over here is called Mr. Slope Guy. Sometimes they call him Slope Man, Slope Dude. And it's basically a drawing you can make really quickly. His eye here that's green is moving from left to right upwards. So it's positive, which is why his eye looks like a plus. And then his red eyebrow over here is moving from left to right downward. And that is a negative slope. So that's why his eye looks like he's winking here. And then the vertical line, this purple one in the middle, makes his nose, right? And under his nose is a U, which stands for undefined. And then his horizontal line, mouth here, is got zeros next to it. And those remind you that a horizontal line has a 0 slope. So the slope man, the slope guy, he's a very popular figure that students like to draw on their paper really quick, just to remind them of the different slope types. Another way of remembering the slope types is the slope tree. You can just draw a triangle, and the left side would be a positive slope. The right side would be a negative slope. The bottom would be your 0 slope for the horizontal line. And then if you wanted to have the trunk of the tree or the stick part at the bottom, that would be your vertical line or your undefined slope. Okay, so here's another example of Mr. Slope Man. Positive slope, negative slope, undefined, which is the vertical line with the U underneath it, and then the 0 slope for horizontal lines. Great job, y'all. Remember that the slope of a line is the measure of the steepness and the direction of the line. It is represented by the variable m. Remember that the slope is the ratio of the vertical change, which is the rise, over the horizontal change, which is the run. Rise over run. Remember that on a coordinate plane, the vertical change is the change in the y values, and the horizontal change is the change in the x values. Remember that there are 4 types of slope: positive, which is moving up from left to right; negative, which is moving down from left to right; and then 0, which is your horizontal line; and then undefined, which is your vertical line. Remember that in ratio form, the vertical lines have a 0 in the denominator of the ratio, which makes it undefined slope, because you cannot divide by 0 in math. That's it for today, guys. So now it's time for me to say it was lovely teaching you math today. See you later.